what's going on, Bewood? We are in our final week of our series called Lost and Found. For the past couple weeks, we've been talking about things that get lost and then get found again. For these past couple weeks, we've been talking a little bit about losing things, getting ourselves sometimes lost, and we've also talked about some of the weird things that we find even in the lost and found section, right? But have you ever thrown away something that you've regretted? You see, sometimes we throw away something because we think we're never going to need it again, or sometimes we throw things away because it's an accident. Check out this video. So here's the reality. Sometimes we lose things and we laugh about them. But there's also times that we lose things and, you know what, maybe it's not as funny as we thought it was. You see, sometimes we lose things that are valuable and maybe we feel that when we lose something, we lost something that was sentimental. We broke something that maybe didn't belong to us, or we misplaced something and we just knew that we were going to get in trouble once they found out. It's difficult to lose something that really matters to you and I when we lose something. But it's even worse when we know that we're the ones at fault for it to happen. You see, when that happens, you might experience all of these types of emotions. You might experience sadness, guilt, embarrassment, anger, shame. You might try to keep it a secret because you know that if the person that finds out that you lost something, you might get in trouble. Or you might try to move on. Because remembering what you lost is sometimes too upsetting. You see, over the past couple weeks, we've been talking about things that are lost and how they're found again. But specifically, we've been talking about how we feel when we are lost. Sometimes we feel lost because we don't feel noticed, or we don't feel seen, or we don't feel valuable. Sometimes we feel lost because we've messed up and we're not really sure how it is that we're supposed to fix that situation. Today we're going to talk about our last story in this series about a young man who lost everything because of the mistakes that he made, and how sometimes we as people, you and I, are sometimes like him. In Luke chapter 15, verse 19 and 11 through 19, this series, we've been looking at one chapter in the Bible and focusing on three different stories in the Bible. Jesus tells these stories to these people, to these Pharisees, and he tells these stories because it was dealing with being lost and found. And each story that is talked about in the past couple weeks really demonstrates and communicates a different important truth. These stories, though, they're not historical stories. They're not real life stories. They're what Jesus called parables. Stories that were basically made up to tell a point. Jesus told these stories to these Pharisees people, and he told them because they were religious leaders who had become self-arrogant. They become self-righteous. And if you didn't follow these certain rules, they looked at you weird. They thought you were sinful. And so Jesus tells these stories to the Pharisees and how they were wrong about themselves, they were wrong about others, and they were also wrong about God. First, he tells a story about the lost sheep and how the Pharisees, and to show the Pharisees that God isn't this angry or judgmental person when we wander away. God finds us, and then he carries us back into safety. Last week, we talked about a story about how this woman, she lost this coin, and it shows how to the Pharisees that God doesn't give up on us when we wander away. Instead, God values and keeps looking for each and every one of us. So today in Luke chapter 15, verse 11 through 19, it says this: Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me a share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together and all he had, set off in a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out a citizen of that country, and who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach up with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to the census, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here am I, starving to death. I will set out, go back to my father, and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. No longer to be worthy to be called your son, but make me one of your hired servants.'" So here's what the son was feeling in this situation. In this situation, he was being impulsive. He had made a big decision, and apparently without getting any guidance or wisdom from other people. He was also feeling hurtful. He may not have meant for the situation to go this way, or for everything to plan out this way, but his actions and his words, they hurt his dad. And by asking for his inheritance early, basically it was saying this. He says, "Dad, you're worth more to me dead than you are alive. Give me that money so that I don't have to depend on you, or basically I don't have to have a relationship with you." He was also selfish. By not stopping to reflect on his actions how his actions might be hurtful to his family, the son was acting very selfishly. He cared only about his money. He cared only about the big adventure that he was going to take, not the people who loved him. And even though the son had safety and food and money at home, he was dreaming about going to this distant land where he imagined he could be. And where he would be, he could do whatever he wanted to do, spend his money and have fun, and everything he thought he was missing at home. You see, but for a while, the son lived and he lived the kind of life that he dreamed of. He lived that lifestyle until he couldn't have it anymore. The famine came, people lost his jobs, people struggled to find food, and he worked for a pig farmer. He ate basically what the pigs eat. Now here's what we miss, okay? If we don't stop and understand the context of the story. Jesus was telling this story to a group of Pharisees. The Pharisees were this religious group of people who felt like that anything pork of a pig was unclean. And in order to be followed and to be loved by God, they couldn't eat anything from the pork. So when the son in the story ate the pigs, the Pharisees would have seen this as a sin against God. And while you might feel compassion for the son in the story, the Pharisees actually felt disgust. You see, the son had thrown away everything that had been good in his life. He had lost his family, his money, his livelihood. He had lost it all. And maybe, just maybe, he even lost his faith. But because of his own bad decisions, he found himself disconnected from others and disconnected from God. He was probably filled with shame about what he had done and the fear of what it was that he was about to do next. Desperate, he decided, you know what? I have to go home. I have to go back, not as a son, but hopefully as a servant. I can go back as a servant. Luke 15, verse 20 to 24 says this: "So he got up, went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, kissed him, and the son said to him, 'His father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servant," he says, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet, bring the fattened calf." Yo, they about to have some steak, "and kill it. Let's have a feast. Let's celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he was found. Now we can begin to celebrate. Can you imagine what a welcome home like this would feel like? After wasting his money, disgracing his father, and bringing shame to his family, the father is still filled with love and compassion. And the father runs to him, hugs him, and gives him a kiss. You see, Jesus told this story to help us discover something that's important about who God is and what it is that God is calling us to do. Years after Jesus told this story, a man by the name of the Apostle Paul wrote a letter that captures the same idea of what Jesus is trying to communicate here in the story. Romans chapter 2, verse 1 through 4 says this: "You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge one another, you're condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. Now we know that God's judgment against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere human being, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you will escape God's judgment? Or do you show contempt for the riches of his kindness, forbearance, and patience, not realizing that God's kindness is intended to lead you to repentance?" So right here, like the father in Jesus's parable, God is this kind, loving, and patient God. He's not an angry person wanting us to mess up and wander away. God is this loving person, ready for us to be welcomed home. So when you've made decisions and you've made mistakes that have led you far away from God, I hope you remember that the son in this story that we talked about today was discovered about his father, that when you feel lost, Jesus welcomes you back. Maybe you can relate to really the son in the story, and I know I can. I know that I've made mistakes, I've made decisions, I've made things that have been wrong, and just like the son in this story, we've wandered away from God. We've wandered and gone far away from him. But no matter how far you are, no matter how far you've wandered, Jesus welcomes you back.